Hello all and welcome back to another Darkseed Deep Dive Q&A session. I'll reiterate for those that didn't watch my first Q&A session. Fair warning, this is just my opinion and isn't necessarily fact. I'm basing this discussion on what I perceive from the scenes in the game. Today's question also comes from Pavachachki. What is the meaning of Mike dying in both games? I honestly never paid attention to the deaths in my deep dive because, well, all of them happen in the Dark World, and my main hypothesis is everything in the Dark World is in Mike's head. In addition, I just assumed that the deaths were included to add gameplay elements to a few fairly linear games. A lot of the deaths are cheap too, which sounds like Cyberdreams to a T. Cyberdreams is also known for forcing odd gameplay mechanics into their games, like adding a second ending to I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. In my opinion, the death scenes scattered around in the games are just for puzzle mechanic purposes only. In any case though, let's take a look at all the death scenes that I found in both games and go through them scene by scene. I'll attempt to tie them to my hypothesis as best I can, but as I stated before, the deaths are really just gameplay mechanics. They're more akin to a story that never plays out since the player is supposed to avoid them. You know, that being said, I'm going to think of them as alternate realities. Anyway, let's start with the first game. The first death on the list is the dog death. The dog only appears in the Dark World in the area next to Mike's house. As I mentioned before, I believe every time that Mike is in the Dark World, he's actually walking around in the Light World. So I believe that Mike actually encounters a feral dog or wolf or coyote while he's wandering around outside. And of course, the player has to perform a specific series of tasks to get past the dog. Those dreaded gameplay puzzle mechanics. So just for fun, I think I'll call this the Cyberdreams Shuffle. Next up on the list is the Dark World cop shooting Mike Dawson. This one probably makes the most sense out of all the deaths. I mean, hey, it's Mike Dawson. I'm joking, of course. I do think it does make sense though, given that Mike enters the police station with a crowbar, an item that can be perceived as a weapon. Mike could also be wielding said crowbar as a weapon since he thinks he's in an alien world. Any frightened person would cling to a weapon to protect themselves from harm if they thought they were in harm's way. Again, it's avoidable if the player performs the convoluted Cyberdreams Shuffle in order to get past the guard. Next up on the list is the Ancient Death. Now the Ancient Death is completely missable. There's only two other deaths like this, and those are in Darkseed 2. Either way, it's just there to give an unsuspecting player a game over. Given the location of this death, it matches up with the graveyard in the Light World, so we can assume that Mike falls into an open grave and maybe breaks his neck. I'm actually going to tackle two deaths on this next entry. The next entry is the Electrocution deaths. These are the biggest dick moves in the game. There are two levers that Mike has to pull, and both will kill Mike if he isn't wearing his gloves. These are more cheap deaths that serve to end the playthrough for unsuspecting players. The first lever correlates to Mike's room. The house that he just bought is in shambles, so it wouldn't surprise me if there was exposed wiring somewhere. Maybe he gets a fatal shock by accident. The same could be said with the second lever in the ancient spaceship. That one correlates to the garage or car. Again, the house is old and so is the garage and car. And remember,
the battery still works.
Next up is the random ball monster hitting Mike. There's a monster in the Dark World that can attack Mike if he gets too close to it. It's avoided with the invisibility headband. Given neither the monster or the headband exists, the death may be a way of expressing Mike succumbing to his delusions. He potentially passes away from not taking his medication or from being too frightened of the monsters that he sees. I leave that open to interpretation because I'm not really sure what his medication is. Next up is falling asleep in the Dark World. So Mike has a very strict bedtime, 8 p.m. on the dot. If 8 o'clock rolls around when Mike is in the Light World, then he'll quickly scurry off to bed regardless of where he is. If Mike falls asleep in the Dark World though, then he falls asleep wherever he is. Falling asleep in the Dark World is an instant game over and another Cyberdreams idea. Gotta make the short game longer by making it harder, right? I don't believe it has any bearing on Mike's well-being, aside from maybe randomly passing out. We see this scene end with him going into an incubator, but more on that in a bit. So that's all the deaths that I found in my various playthroughs of Darkseed 1. Again, I think the deaths are just there to A, give Darkseed some more puzzles, and B, be cheap. But there are also scenarios that never were. In any case, let's take a look at Darkseed 2 now. These deaths, I'll admit, are a little easier to tie to actual scenarios, for the most part. First up is Fill Your Belly. The Fill Your Belly death is a super cheap death that really betrays the Dark World Diner guy's character. The guy is nice to Mike, but then allows him to die from feeding him too much? It doesn't make any sense. The only thing that I can think to correlate it to an actual death is Mike ordered something from Hank's and he choked. Or Hank kills Mike. Hank is seen with Jimmy and Melissa discussing illegal activities in the second dream sequence. Maybe he's not as nice as we're led to believe? I don't know, maybe. Everyone else has their fair share of dark secrets. Why not Hank? Next is the Electrocution. The Electrocution death is another cheap death from Darkseid 2. Like the Hank's Diner death, it's completely avoidable. To correlate this to the light world would mean he was electrocuted in the pool hall. And while I don't believe Mike mentions anything about exposed wiring or what have you, I'm thinking maybe Jimmy and Melissa had enough of Mike prying into things and they killed him. Which seems like the likeliest of scenarios. Again, they're shown to be involved in illegal activities per the second dream sequence. Plus we know that Jimmy has a gun and is willing to pull it on those that he believes is snooping in his business. Next up is Picking Locks. This is a death scenario that the player never has to worry about unless they go out of their way looking for it. There are 4 areas where Mike can pick locks in the Dark World: the pool hall, the morgue, Dr. Sims' office, and his own house. There isn't a locked door at the pool hall in the light world, so we can just assume that Jimmy and Melissa attack Mike again. The locked door in the morgue has a light world equivalent, so Mike could have possibly hurt himself trying to get in. Or Larson could have attacked him. Mike did threaten him a bit prior to the door being unlocked. Or, the more reasonable thought, Larson could have called the cops. The door in Dark World Dr. Sims correlates with the light world as well. Again, Dr. Sims probably calls the cops on Mike for trying to break in. For the Dark World Dawson household, I believe that Mike's mom found the murder weapon and locked the door so he couldn't get in. Again, Mike's mom would call the cops. Now, Dawson getting arrested isn't a death by any means, but the goal of Darkseid 2 is to keep Dawson out of jail. So, in a way, it is an end to his normal life. Keep in mind though, the doors are ultimately just a gameplay mechanic that keeps the player from seeing things or obtaining items before they're supposed to. Next up is Gun Down. There are 3 areas where Mike can be shot: Ick in front of the zipper, the Hall of Gross Babies, and in front of the High Priestess's house. Remember, Ick correlates to Minnie and Daisy, the giant baby correlates to Gargan, and the nameless sentry correlates to the deputy. Minnie, Daisy, and Gargan don't have guns as far as I know, unless you count Gargan's bulging arms. In any case, the only one that really makes sense is the sentry guarding Rita's house. Again, that sentry correlates to the deputy. Both characters say they can't talk to Mike, and Mike can't enter the house. When Mike doesn't listen, he gets shot. A bit extreme, but Mike could have been acting belligerent and wielding one of his items as a weapon. I don't know about you, but I'd be afraid if Mike was coming towards me with a coat hanger. Again, the deputy could have just arrested Mike as well. Going back to Minnie, Daisy, and Gargan though, I'm not really sure how those correlate to a death scene. Again, maybe Mike just pesters them too much and they call the cops. It's kind of a weak argument, but it's really the only one I can make for that one. Next up is the Life Force Leech. The Life Force Leech serves as an exit to the Hall of Death. Remember, the only way out of there is death. This is a gameplay mechanic. The player can encounter this as many times as they'd like, but it isn't necessary after the first time you do it, unless of course you forget the Dark Data card or whatever it was called. The Life Force Leech could equate to being found guilty of murder and being sentenced to death, especially when he runs out of extra lives. Of course, that doesn't really take into account that you have to do it to complete the game, but I don't know. This one's a tough one. Next up is Stealing the Light. The last death that I know of is when the Dark World Sheriff vaporizes Mike. This death makes the most sense in my opinion. Mike is in the sheriff's office and tries to steal evidence. Maybe Mike was seen as a threat as he's wielding an item as a weapon, or as I mentioned with some of my other entries, Mike's arrested. So that's my attempt to correlate the deaths with something in the light world. Again, I believe that these are their own what-if scenarios. Even though I tried to tie each death to a specific scenario, we could just assume that Mike dying in the dark world symbolizes two things. One is he falls victim to whatever illness he has, or two, he's arrested for doing something illegal. The last scenes I'll mention are the game over scenes. There are 2 for Darkseed 1 and 3 for Darkseed 2. For Darkseed 1, there's the alien that comes out of Mike's mouth if you lose while in the light world, and there's a scene where Mike is placed in an incubator. Given we don't know if the medicine he takes keeps him healthy in addition to keeping him grounded in reality, the game overs in the first game shows that he accepts the delusion as he's placed in the incubator and as the alien pops out of his mouth. Both show that he will keep living out his dark world fantasies. The game overs in the second game are more gloomy. Granted, I say that there are 3 game overs, but realistically there's only one. The behemoth destroys the world. Mike has bigger delusions of grandeur in Darkseed 2 as he sees himself as the chosen one. So the game over scene is showing that. Again, he's ultimately buying into his delusions. Dying too many times in the dark world in Darkseed 2 also causes Mike to fall into the River of the Dead. We see this once in the game without actually dying, and that's during the second dream sequence. While this isn't a death for Mike himself, I do think it symbolizes Mike's loss of innocence or sanity. And what I mean by this is, Mike falls into the River of the Dead after killing Rita, which to me means that he lost himself after he killed her. Well, I believe this was a bit of a long-winded way of answering a question. I don't think the deaths have any bearing on what I discussed in the deep dive, but do serve as what-if scenarios. So thanks again to Pavachachki for asking the question. It was honestly a lot of fun looking at these different scenarios. If anyone else has a question they'd like answered regarding my synopsis of Darkseed 2, then please leave a comment down below or in the deep dive video. As always, thank you for watching.